Let's proceed to this part. So in this part, Manoni argues that when white people came in Madagascar, the Malagasy people discovered that they were human and then realized humanity split between white and black people, and subsequently they wanted equality with white males. However, find out natong si Fanon na that's occurred, I mean that's is a prior colonization. Kasi these Malagasy people had a cohesive concept of their own identity that had nothing to do with white people. Next slide, please. Okay, so a white man in a colony never felt inferior in any respect. Sabi nga dito, in Martinique, merong 200 whites that considered themselves superior to 300,000 people of color. And then in South Africa naman, there are 2 million whites against almost 13 million native people. And it has never occurred to a single black to consider himself superior to a member of white minority. And the feeling of inferiority of the colonized is correlative to Europeans' feeling of superiority. Ito yung pinakaano dito eh. It is the racist who create his inferior. Kasi colonized people suffered not because they are inferior to white people. They suffer because white people see them as inferior. So in response to this, those colonial people attempt to whiten themselves in order to show to white people that they are human too. Next slide, please. Okay, so this part naman, which is kasi hindi nagigets nitong si Manoni yung idea ni Fanon. So Manoni doesn't get it because he believed that dependency complex is fundamental part of colonized people and that only certain types of people are psychologically suitable for colonization. And he also reinforced the idea na that colonized people's feeling of inferiority and dependency were instilled through colonization. Next is itong Prospero complex. So Manoni observed kasi that person who suffer from Prospero complex have failed to see that groups of people who are different from them live in their own world that must be respected. So to conclude this chapter, Fanon emphasized that colonists impart the feeling of inferiority in the colonized and that this emotion did not exist before to colonialism. He also claims that Manoni has no awareness of the psychological character of Malagasy people prior to colonial dominance. And he doesn't even have any idea of what the Malagasy character may be if freed from colonial dominance. So that's all for this chapter. Let's proceed for the next chapter.
So, tumungo naman tayo sa chapter 5, the fact of blackness. So, nagsimula si Fanon sa pamamagitan ng pagtalakay niya sa naging karanasan niya tuwing tinitignan siya bilang black person. So, ayon sa pagkakaintindi ko sa chapter na to, may dalawang uri ng gazes. Ito yung black gaze at white gaze. So, yung dalawang gazes na ito ay may pinagkaiba. Ito ay nakabatay sa kapangyarihan o power ng bawat gaze. Yung black gaze is one with inferiority and resistance, habang yung white gaze naman ay nagmiming ng power and domination. So, sa madaling salita, yung black gaze ay inferior or parang inaapak-apakan lang, while yung white gaze naman ay nagpapakita ng superiority. So, tinalakay din ni Fanon dito ang black people are objectified sa white society. Ang mga taong katulad nila ay ino-objectify in a sense na hindi sila nakikita bilang kauri. And that this objectification daw is reinforced by the media and other cultural institutions. So, yung pagre-represent sa kanila ay inferior, palagi lang nasa baba. So, mas didiinan pa nito ni Rhea mamaya. So, the experience of blackness is fundamentally different from the experience of whiteness. At kita naman yun dito. So, being black creates a sense of alienation sa kanila. Ito namang double consciousness So yung double consciousness naman ay inilalarawan ni Fanon bilang karanasan na makita ang sarili sa pamamagitan ng mata ng iba. Yung mga black person, constantly aware sila na ganito yung paningin ng mga white person sa kanila. Kaso, ang constant na awareness na ito ay syempre damaging din sa part nila. Kasi nagre-result ito ng self-alienization na feeling nila hindi sila belong palagi. So, impact of colonialism on the psyche of the colonized. Kilalakay din ni Fanon ang kolonyalismo. Ito ay isang marahas na sistema na ininisenyo upang panatili ang kapangyarihan at kontrol sa mga kolonisado. Nagre-resulta ito ng self-hatred at self-rejection sa mga taong nakolonya. So ayon kay Fanon, ang tanging paraan upang makalaya mula sa panloob na pangaaping ito ay ang pagtanggi sa mga beliefs at mga paniniwala o mga itinuturo ng mga kolonisador at yakapin ang sariling kultura at pagkakakilanlan. So, sabi nga ni Fanon, sa Amerika daw, ang Negroes are segregated. While sa South America naman, ang mga black people ay nilalatigo sa streets. Yung Negro strikers are cut down by machine guns, and sa West Africa naman, ang Negro daw ay tinatrato bilang animal. So, hindi talaga makataong pagtatrato sa kanila. Sabi pa niya, I am given no chance. I am overdetermined from without. I am the slave, not the idea that others have of me, but of my own experience. Binanggit niya rin ang white language ay kadalasang ginagamit bilang kasangkapan ng dominasyon habang sila na black person ay nakikita bilang mababa at syempre devalued sila. Pinapahiwatig ni Fanon na may great divide talaga sa mga white at black. Hindi binibigyan ng kakayahang mag-express o madinig ang mga hinanaing nila. Sabi pa niya, Negroes are savages, brutes, illiterates. But in my own case, I knew that these statements were false. So, hindi naman dahil sa kulay nila, hindi na sila ganun, hindi na sila bobo or what. You know, they're more than sila sa kulay nila. So, tatalakay din ni Fanon yung color prejudice. Ito yung pagja-judge mo agad sa tao batay sa kulay niya. So, the unreasoning hatred of one race for another. It is the contempt of the stronger and richer peoples for those whom they consider inferior to themselves, and it is the bitter resentment of those who are kept in subjection and are so frequently insulted. So this chapter will be continued by UB.
In continuation of Chapter 5, The Fact of Blackness, 1. Stereotype. What is a stereotype? A stereotype is an oversimplified belief or idea about a particular group of people or things, often based on assumptions or generalization. It is a mental shortcut that can lead to unfair judgments and perpetuate biases and discriminations. This often leads to racism. It is always used by the whites to the blacks. We have here two examples. The emotion is completely Negro as reason is Greek. Sin is Negro as virtue is white. The black people are portrayed as emotional, irrational, and instinctual, while the whites are seen as rational, logical, and intellectual. The same is true with the second example. Number 2, an acquisitive relation is established between the world and him, the whites. Due to racism and stereotypes of the whites, the black people think, due to emotions that they have felt, that the world is biased only for the whites and they think they have no room left in this world. Number 3, I belonged to a race that had already been working in gold and silver 2,000 years ago. After searching through all the antiquity of the black man, he found something that he thinks it would change the minds of the whites to accept them. He thinks that the whites are wrong from not treating them right, since 2,000 years ago, the black men knew how to build houses, govern empires, erect cities, cultivate fields, mine for metals, weave cotton, and forge steels. He found out that their culture was great in their time. Number four, the Negro creates an anti-racist racism for himself. This means that the black man's eagerness for acceptance and validation with the whites, the black men made it clear that they don't want to rule the world. Instead, only to seek abolition of the ethnic privileges. Also, they assert the solidarity with the oppressed. Next slide, please. Number five, Negro experience is not a whole, for there is not merely one Negro, there are Negros. Experiences such as discrimination, being a slave, and not being able to exercise your own freedom are the common experiences of these black people. We do not invalidate what other types of experiences these people are experiencing. This doesn't mean that this experience cannot and will not happen to the others. Last, between the white man and me, the connection was irrevocably one of transcendence. The author explains connection between the white man and himself as a black man is, re- is irrevocably one of transcendence because it goes beyond mere personal or individual interactions. It encompasses the historical, social, and institutional